The jungle trembled beneath the soldiers' boots as they moved through the thick vines and towering trees. Birds scattered from the treetops while strange alien creatures hid in fear. Private Jensen wiped sweat from his brow and raised his rifle. Again, eyes scanning the shadows ahead. They had been sent to planet Therion under orders of silence and speed. The mission was simple on paper: find the enemy base, disable communications, and extract within 48 hours. But nothing about this planet was simple. The humidity clung to their skin like wet fabric, and every sound in the jungle felt like a warning. The squad called her a monster. Whispers traveled between soldiers during meals and patrols. If you see the red-striped one, don't shoot, run. No one knew what she was, only that she moved without sound and struck without warning. Jensen thought it was just fear talking, but even the captain kept glancing over his shoulder. That morning, they found what was left of Bravo team. Their helmets were crushed like cans, armor sliced clean through, and their faces frozen in terror. No bullet wounds, no signs of energy weapons, just raw force. Like an animal had torn through them with claws made of steel. The jungle grew quieter as they pushed deeper. Birds stopped singing. The wind itself seemed to vanish. Jensen gripped his weapon tighter and felt the hair rise on the back of his neck. Then a rustle to the left. He turned. Nothing. Another whisper to the right. Still nothing. They were being watched. Sergeant Quinn raised a fist to signal halt. Everyone froze. The only sound was Jensen's breathing in his helmet. Then something flashed above, a blur of red and black. The branches shook and something landed behind them. Guns turned. But it was gone. Jensen saw it clearly for the first time when Corporal Diaz screamed. A tall figure stood in the clearing ahead. Her skin was marked in crimson stripes like a tiger, and her glowing yellow eyes locked onto Diaz, ears sharp as blades twitched above her head. A long striped tail flicked behind her. Her muscles were lean, tight, and powerful. She looked part woman, part predator. Diaz fired. The shots missed. The figure moved faster than human eyes could track. In 1 second she was standing, in the next she was gone. Diaz fell with a gash across his armor, not dead but out. Jensen aimed but hesitated. Her eyes weren't full of rage. They were full of pain. The rest of the team opened fire, but their weapons only scorched the trees. She disappeared into the green. The squad retreated to a nearby hill to regroup. Jensen kept thinking about those eyes. He had seen bloodlust in enemies before, but this felt different. Like she didn't want to fight but had no choice. Night fell fast on Therion. They lit no fires. The team sat in silence, nerves twitching with every sound. The red-striped creature hadn't followed. But everyone felt she was near, watching, waiting. Jensen sat against a tree, replaying the moment in his head, the way she moved, the sadness in her expression. She wasn't hunting for fun. In the darkness, someone whispered, "She's just defending something." Jensen looked up. It was the medic Hannah. She pointed to a carved stone in her hand, an alien symbol they found near Bravo team's remains. It wasn't a weapon. It was a gravestone that changed everything. The squad had walked into a graveyard with guns drawn. No wonder she attacked. They weren't invaders. They were desecrators. The realization hit Jensen like a hammer. The beast was protecting her dead. Sergeant Quinn refused to change orders. "We finished the mission," he growled. "We're soldiers, not peacekeepers." Jensen wanted to argue, but he stayed silent. Orders were orders. But inside, a war had started. One between his training and his conscience. As dawn approached, Jensen volunteered to scout ahead, alone. Quinn agreed, thinking he was eager to prove himself. But Jensen had another plan. He needed to find her, not to kill her. To understand her. Something inside told him this wasn't just war. It was a mistake growing into something worse. He moved carefully through the underbrush, away from the team. He followed broken branches, claw marks, faint traces of movement. Then he saw it, a hidden cave behind a waterfall. Something shimmered inside, a glow. Not red, blue, gentle. He stepped closer and saw the shape inside. There she was, curled around. Something small, a body. Another like her, but unmoving. Yenzin lowered his weapon and stepped into the light. Her eyes snapped open. She leapt to her feet, claws raised. But she didn't strike. She looked at him, not with fury, with confusion. He raised his empty hands slowly. No threat. Just breath. And silence. She looked down at the small figure, a sister. A daughter, someone she had lost. Her face twisted in sorrow. Not a monster. Not a beast. Just someone mourning in a war she never asked for. Yenzin realized the truth before a word was spoken. The enemy wasn't her. It was the story they had been told. And now, standing before her grief, he understood just how fragile the strongest can be. Yenzin stood still as the alien girl stared at him with wary eyes. Her breathing was sharp, but her body didn't move. The blue glow from the cave wall lit her face softly. Her striped skin seemed to shimmer like flame painted on silk. She looked young, but her eyes carried a lifetime of sorrow. He slowly reached into his pack and pulled out a field ration. Without breaking eye contact, he placed it gently on a rock and stepped back. She didn't blink. Her eyes moved from the food to his hands. She was trying to understand if this was a trick or peace. Behind her, the smaller body lay motionless. Yenzin realized it was not just someone she had lost, but someone she had been trying to protect. That's why she attacked the squad. Not out of hatred. Out of fear. Out of love. She stepped forward, still silent. Her tail swayed behind her like a warning flag. She picked up the ration carefully and sniffed it. Her nose wrinkled, but hunger won. She sat near the body, unwrapped the bar, and bit slowly. All while keeping her glowing eyes on Yenzin. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. Words would only confuse her. So he sat down across from her at a safe distance and looked around the cave. There were drawings on the walls, handprints, symbols. Pictures of her kind gathered around glowing blue trees. This cave was sacred. A sudden rustle came from outside. She snapped to her feet. Her ears twitched, claws extended. She was protecting again. Yenzin raised a hand, trying to calm her. Then he heard it too. A voice on his comms. Sergeant Quinn's voice. They were tracking him. He turned off the comms immediately. He couldn't risk them storming the cave. If they saw her, they would shoot. And if they shot, she would kill. It wouldn't be a battle. It would be a massacre. He had to stop. He drew a small sketchpad from his pocket. On one page, he drew a figure like her and another like him standing apart. Then he drew the same two figures standing together. He turned it around and showed her. She tilted her head. Then pointed at the second image. She made a quiet growling sound, not aggressive, confused. Then she pointed at the drawing of herself and the one on the ground. Her face dropped, her body slumped. The mask of the predator slipped away, and a grieving girl remained. Yenzin didn't move. He just nodded. She understood loss, so did he. His brother died in the first landing wave, not by her kind. By bad orders. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a photo. His brother in uniform, smiling. He placed it next to her body. The alien girl looked at the picture, then at him. Her eyes softened. Her claws retracted. Slowly, she reached out and touched the photo. It was the first time she made contact without fear. It was the first sign of trust. Outside, boots hit the ground. Voices neared. Quinn and the others were close. Too close. Yenzin had to act. He stepped to the cave entrance and blocked it with his body. He activated his comms and whispered, "Not hostile. Do not engage." But Quinn didn't listen. The squad burst through the brush. Weapons raised. They saw the striped girl and shouted orders. She jumped back, growling. Her claws returned. The air tensed like a spring pulled too tight. A single shot would end everything. Jensen stepped in front of her, arms raised. "She's not the enemy," he shouted. Quinn barked at him to move. But Jensen didn't. He pointed at the child's body behind them. "She was only protecting her," he said. The squad hesitated. Jungle held its breath. No one moved. The alien girl stood behind Jensen, chest rising fast, but claws still. Her tail wrapped tightly around her own legs. For the first time she looked scared. Not fierce, not deadly. Just scared. One of the younger soldiers, Harris, lowered his rifle. "She's just a girl," he whispered. That single voice cracked. The tension. The others began to lower their weapons. All except Quinn. His finger hovered on the trigger. His eyes full of rage, Jensen turned slowly to face him. "Please," he said. "Don't make her a monster because we refuse to see her pain." Quinn's jaw clenched, his finger twitched. Then he cursed, turned, and walked out of the cave. Inside the cave, the silence returned. The alien girl sat again near her lost. "One." She looked at Jensen, this time with something new in her eyes. A fragile hope. Jensen sat outside the cave with his rifle across his lap. The jungle slowly came alive again, with chirps and distant rustling. Behind him, the alien girl watched silently from the shadows. She hadn't moved from her sister's side, but something in her had changed. No more growls. No more lunges. She was cautious, but no longer a threat. Jensen knew it wasn't because she trusted him yet. It was because, for the first time, someone had stood between her and a bullet. Quinn paced back and forth, chewing on a dried ration. "Bar!" He kept shooting angry looks at Jensen, but he said nothing. The rest of the squad sat nearby, quiet, unsure what to believe. They had seen a killer. Now they saw a sister. The medic, Hannah, came up beside Jensen. "We can't just stay here," she said quietly. Jensen nodded. "I know, but if we leave her, Command will just send another team. One that won't ask questions." Hannah looked back at the cave. "So what now?" Jensen stood slowly and walked to the edge of the waterfall. The sound helped him think. There had to be a way to prove she wasn't the enemy. He needed more than just emotion. He needed evidence. Something that made even Quinn shut up. He remembered the cave paintings. He had seen them in brief flashes. When he first entered, handprints, patterns, stories and symbols. Maybe they were history. Maybe they were warnings. Either way, they were answers. He asked Hannah to stay near the girl while he re-entered the cave. The alien watched him carefully, but didn't stop him. He moved slowly, showing his empty hands. She stayed by the small body, her fingers brushing the carved beads around its neck. The walls told a story, painted in red and blue streaks with black outlines and circles. At first, Jensen didn't understand, but as he followed the trail of drawings, it clicked. It wasn't just a family cave. It was a record of an entire village, images of tall beings like her standing beside glowing trees, circles that looked like homes, symbols of gathering. Then, darker scenes. Ships falling from the sky, fire streaking across the forest. Beings running. The last symbol showed only two left. Her and the small one. He stepped back and turned to her. She saw where he was looking. She walked slowly to the wall and pointed at the last two shapes, then at herself, then at the body, then nothing. That was the end of her world. Jensen took photos of the cave walls with his visor cam. He didn't know if Command would care, but he would make them see it. This wasn't a battlefield, it was a graveyard. And they had walked into it with guns raised. Outside, Quinn barked an order to pack up. He didn't want to hear about cave paintings or grief. He only cared about finishing the mission. But now Jensen had a new mission, a personal one. He was going to make sure she lived. He walked up to Quinn and stood firm. She's the last of her kind. That's not a target. That's a survivor. Quinn rolled his eyes. And what? You want to take her back to base? Let Command adopt her? Jensen shook his head. No, I want to protect her. Here, the squad listened. Some nodded, others looked away. But none stepped forward to stop him. Even Harris, the youngest, whispered. She didn't ask for this. Quinn muttered something under his breath and stormed off into the trees. That night, Jensen stayed outside the cave with his rifle pointed down. The alien girl finally stepped outside for the first time. She looked up at the stars with wide eyes. Her ears flicked at every sound, but she didn't retreat. Jensen offered her a blanket, unsure if she would accept. She took it slowly, feeling the texture like it was something holy. She wrapped it around her shoulders and sat beside the fire Hana had built earlier. The flames danced in her golden eyes. They didn't speak. There was no need. Every crackle of the fire and whisper of the wind carried more weight than words. Two survivors from different worlds sitting side by side in silence. Bound not by language, but by loss, Hana gave her a canteen of water. She drank it with small, careful sips, like she wasn't sure it was real. When she finished, she looked at Jensen again. This time, there was something different in her gaze. Not fear, not sorrow, but something like thanks. Jensen looked into the jungle and wondered how long peace like this could last. As long as Quinn was in charge, danger still hovered nearby. But in that moment, under starlight and firelight, he made a quiet promise to himself. He would protect her. Not because she was weak, not because she was different, but because no one else would. The morning light broke through the thick jungle leaves, casting golden beams across the clearing. Jensen sat on a log, sharpening his blade not out of need, but habit. The alien girl remained close to the cave, wrapping the blanket tighter around herself. Her sharp ears twitched at every sound, still alert, but no longer panicked. Quinn hadn't returned from his solo patrol. Hana guessed he was reporting back to command. Jensen feared worse. If Quinn sent a false report, this place could soon become a landing zone for soldiers with no patience and no questions. The fire crackled between them. Harris tossed a stick into the flame, watching it disappear into ash. She looks like she could vanish at any second, he said quietly. Like she's waiting for us to betray her. Jensen nodded. Because that's what everyone else did. He stood and approached her slowly. She didn't move, but her eyes followed his every step. Jensen held out a different ration bar this time, one with dried fruit. She sniffed it, then reached out and took it gently. Her claws brushed his fingers, but didn't scratch. Hana stepped forward and showed her a small medical scanner. She pointed at her own arm, then at the girl's. The alien hesitated, then slowly extended her arm. Hana scanned the skin and frowned. She's dehydrated. And she's barely eaten in days. They set up a small meal using their remaining supplies. The alien girl sat beside them but didn't speak. She watched the way they interacted, the way they laughed, complained, and shared. These things were foreign to her, but also fascinating. Jensen tried to draw again. This time, he sketched her face. Not as a threat, but as she looked now. Calm, curious, sad. He handed her the paper. She stared at it, tilting her head, then placed it gently inside a pouch tied to her waist. An hour later, Quinn returned with a grim face. He didn't say anything. At first, just marched into the clearing and dropped his pack. Then he looked at Jensen. Command's sending an evac craft tomorrow. We're being pulled out. Jensen raised an eyebrow. And her? Quinn shrugged. Not our problem anymore. They'll send a cleanup crew. You know what that means. Harris stood up quickly, his voice tight. She's not a mess to clean. She's a person. Quinn's eyes burned with frustration. She killed 6 of our people. Jensen stepped between them. She defended her sister's grave. We walked in with guns, she reacted. Any one of us would have done the same. The air grew tense. The fire seemed smaller now. Hannah stepped forward, speaking softly. What if we don't leave her behind? What if we take her somewhere safe? Quinn laughed bitterly. Where? Earth? Command won't let that happen. She's a classified species. Jensen didn't flinch. Then we don't tell Command. Quinn's expression darkened. You're talking treason. Jensen crossed his arms. I'm talking about doing what's right. You said we finished the mission. Well, maybe this is the real mission now. No one spoke for a while. The jungle filled the silence with buzzing insects and distant bird calls. The alien girl looked between them, sensing the weight in the air. She didn't know the words, but she understood conflict. She had lived inside it for too long. That night, they moved camp closer to the cliffside where the evac would land. The alien girl stayed near Jensen at all times. She had started mimicking the way he walked, the way he crouched and listened. It was strange and oddly touching. He noticed her tracing shapes in the dirt with a stick, circles, stars, small faces. She paused and looked up at him with a question in her eyes. He sat beside her and began drawing Earth's moon. She watched every stroke like it was magic. The next morning, the rumble of a transport ship echoed over the trees. It was coming, faster than expected. Quinn barked orders to pack everything, but Jensen moved slower. He had already made his decision. He wasn't leaving without her. He turned to Hannah. Can you cover for us for 15 minutes? She nodded, without asking why. Harris looked ready to follow him, but Jensen shook his head. You stay. Tell them we're clearing the trail. Delay them. No lies. Just hold them off. He grabbed the alien girl's hand and led her into the jungle. She followed without hesitation. Deeper they went, past vines and roots, until they reached the riverbed. A small escape pod from the original landing craft still sat half buried in mud. He wiped off the panel and checked the battery levels. Still functional, just enough for one low-orbit jump. Maybe a hidden moon, maybe a deep forest planet. Somewhere Command wouldn't find her. She looked at the pod, then back at him. Her expression was unreadable. But when he opened the hatch, she stepped inside without fear. Jensen climbed in after her, knowing this wasn't just escape. It was choice. The pod hummed softly as systems came online. Jensen quickly tapped at the control screen, setting the coordinates for a nearby uninhabited moon. It wasn't ideal, but it would buy them time. It would give her a chance to live without fear. The alien girl sat across from him, knees pulled up to her chest. She watched everything he did with careful eyes. When he looked up, she gave a small nod. She didn't speak his language, but something deeper was understood between them now. Above them, the sky cracked open as the transport ship descended. The roar of its engines shook the treetops. Back at the cliffside, Quinn would be looking for him. Hannah and Harris would be stalling. But they couldn't stall forever. Jensen activated the cloaking shield around the pod. It would make them invisible for a short time, just enough to clear the atmosphere. The countdown began. He glanced one last time through the viewport. Leaves waved in the wind like silent farewells. The alien girl reached out and touched his hand. Her fingers were warm and steady. She was ready. This time she wasn't being taken. She was choosing to go. That made all the difference. With a quiet thud, the pod launched upward. The jungle fell away beneath them. Birds scattered below, and clouds drifted lazily above. Jensen stared at the control screen, heart racing but focused. One wrong calculation, and they'd burn on re-entry. The pod rattled as it broke the lower atmosphere. Heat shield panels glowed red, then cooled. Stars began to appear beyond the edge of the sky. The girl leaned forward to look through the glass. Her eyes widened as she saw space for the first time. He smiled. For a moment, the war felt far away. For a moment, they weren't a soldier and a survivor. Just two souls in the vast silence of space, running toward peace. After 20 minutes, they reached orbit. Jensen guided the pod toward the moons. Dark side, avoiding satellite scans. The small celestial body was mostly forest and rock, cold at night, but quiet. No cities. No orders. No weapons. They landed gently near a patch of trees. The pod systems powered down, leaving only emergency lights glowing inside. The alien girl stepped out first, her feet pressing into soft moss. She breathed deeply, then looked at the stars. Jensen followed, scanning the area. It was safe, at least for now. He set up a small shelter beside the pod using leftover gear. The girl sat nearby, touching the soil, exploring the moon with childlike wonder. They ate a quiet meal by a small heater. She offered him a carved bead. From her pouch, he recognized it as one of the same beads around her sister's neck. He took it with both hands, bowing his head in respect. He placed the bead on a string and wore it around his wrist. She touched it once, gently, then smiled for the first time. It was a small smile, but it was real. Days passed. They explored the forest together. She showed him which plants were safe, which trees gave warmth when burned, and which stones marked paths. In return, he taught her how to build traps, how to filter water, and how to use simple tools. At night, they sat around the heater, drawing in the dirt or watching the stars. The silence no longer felt empty. It felt full of meaning. Full of healing. Jensen began carving a message into a stone slab using his combat knife. It was a symbol. Two figures standing side by side under stars. The same image he had drawn in the cave. This time, it would be permanent. But peace never lasts without challenge. On the fourth night, he saw a blinking red light on his visor. A signal. A drone had passed nearby and detected a human biosign. Command was tracking him. Their time had just run out. He didn't tell her at first. He stayed calm. Let her enjoy the stars a little longer. But the next day, he checked the pod scanner. 3 ships had changed course. One was headed toward the moon. He began packing supplies quietly. Weapons, rations, water. She noticed the shift in his movement. Her face darkened. She wasn't dumb. She knew danger when it crawled near. Jensen crouched beside her and held out a drawing. This one showed a cave. A new cave, deeper in the forest, hidden from the sky. She took it, looked into his eyes, and nodded without fear. They left. The pod behind. They moved like shadows beneath tall trees. The moon offered no sound but their footsteps. Each step they took was a choice. Not to run from war, but to protect what little peace they had found. Asterisk, they moved quickly through the trees, guided by moonlight and instinct. The alien girl led the way now, moving like wind through branches. Jensen followed close behind, checking the scanner on his wrist. The enemy ship was still hours away, but it was closing fast. The cave she led him to was deep beneath a rock overhang, almost invisible from above. Its mouth was covered with vines and thick roots. They cleared just enough to crawl inside. Darkness swallowed them as they entered, leaving behind the open sky. Inside, the air was cool and dry. The ground sloped gently downward. Small glowing. Moss clung to the walls, giving off a dim green light. The girl moved without fear. This place was familiar to her, safe. She had likely used it before. Jensen dropped his pack and set down his rifle. He took a breath and listened. No buzzing from drones. No engine rumble. For now they were hidden. He glanced over and saw her. Sitting quietly, legs crossed, hands in her lap. She traced symbols into the dust with her fingers. They looked like letters, or maybe prayers. Jensen watched her for a moment before joining her. He drew a small circle, then a figure beside it. She tilted her head, then added her own mark. Outside, the scanner blinked again. The ship had broken orbit. They had less than 3 hours before it arrived. He didn't tell her yet. Not until he had a real plan. Not until he knew she would be safe. She stood suddenly and walked deeper into the cave. Jensen followed, ducking under low stone arches and stepping around water pools. At the very end of the tunnel, she pointed upward. A natural chimney led to the surface far above. He understood instantly. An emergency escape. If things went wrong, they could climb out and vanish into the forest. It was risky, but it was hope. Jensen smiled and nodded. She returned a small smile before turning back. They spent the next hour preparing. He set traps near the cave mouth. Small things, enough to confuse or slow anyone who entered. He taught her how to use a signal flare. She practiced holding it steady, her hands surprisingly firm. Jensen left a message encoded in his cums and buried it near the cave entrance. If Harris or Hannah ever found it, they'd know what happened. They'd know he didn't run away. He made a choice. The sun began to rise, casting long shadows across the trees outside. A sharp buzz pierced the air. He looked at his scanner. The ship had landed, not far, a few kilometers. Boots would be on the ground soon. The alien girl crouched near the entrance, alert and still. She had a small blade in her hand. Not a weapon of war, but a tool of survival. Jensen moved beside her and placed his hand on hers. She looked up, calm but ready. Then they heard voices, distant but growing louder. Orders barked. Branches snapped under heavy gear. The soldiers weren't here to talk. They were here to finish what command had started. Jensen raised his rifle but kept the safety on. He didn't want to shoot. But if it came to that, he wouldn't let them. Take her. She had lost enough. She deserved more than fear. A shadow crossed the cave mouth. A soldier stepped inside, visor blinking, weapon raised. Jensen held his breath. The soldier took another step. Then his foot hit the wire. A trap triggered. A flash. A hiss of smoke. Confusion. Jensen pulled her back as the smoke filled the entrance. Shouts echoed. Another trap went off, spraying bright powder into the air. It wouldn't stop them for long. But it gave them seconds. Seconds they needed. He turned to the girl and pointed upward. She understood. They ran to the back and began climbing the narrow rock shaft. Her movements were quick and practiced. Jensen followed, his heart pounding in his chest. As they neared the top, he heard weapons fire below. The soldiers were inside, but it was too late. The two of them burst out from the forest floor like ghosts from the earth. They ran through trees, over roots, across shallow streams. They didn't stop until their lungs burned and the forest swallowed the sound of pursuit. Only then did they collapse behind a fallen tree, gasping for breath. She looked at him, face flushed, eyes wide. He nodded once, hand gripping hers. No words were needed. They had escaped again. But they both knew it wouldn't be the last time. Jensen kept his ear low to the ground and listened. The forest was still, but too still. Even the birds had gone quiet. That meant the soldiers were near again. The moon forest gave them cover, but it wouldn't last forever. Beside him, the alien girl crouched low and scanned the trees. Her golden eyes narrowed as her ears twitched to each sound. She pointed northward, toward a rock ridge rising over the mist. It would give them high ground and a better view. They moved quickly, feet light, breaths steady. Jensen carried his rifle tight across his chest while she gripped a sharpened staff she had carved herself. Together, they moved like shadows through ferns and roots. When they reached the ridge, Jensen climbed first and helped her up. The view stretched wide. Below, the soldiers moved in lines, checking thermal scans and dropping beacons. They were sweeping every direction like a closing net. He activated his visor zoom. At the front of the search line, a new figure had appeared. Not Quinn, Someone higher, someone serious. They wore a black coat and an officer's badge. That meant one thing: this wasn't a recovery mission anymore. The alien girl saw it too. Her lips tightened, and she tapped the scar on her left shoulder. It was old, half-faded, but deep. She had faced people like that before. Jensen didn't ask how she got it. He just nodded and looked away. They stayed hidden on the ridge until night fell again. Once the stars rose, they moved down into a lower valley. Water trickled through stones, and old trees blocked the sky above. It felt ancient, untouched, like even war wouldn't dare disturb it. They found a hollow under a wide tree and sat to rest. Jensen passed her some dried fruit, and she shared roasted roots she had dug earlier. They ate in silence, grateful for even a few quiet minutes together. She took the drawing from her pouch and laid it on the ground, the one with the two figures standing under stars. Then she added to it a third shape, a circle with a line through it. A warning. Jensen understood at once. She had seen their symbol before. He leaned back and spoke softly. They won't stop, even if we run to the edge of the system. She didn't respond, but she placed her hand on his. That was answer enough. The next morning, a small drone buzzed overhead. Jensen reacted fast and shot it down before it could transmit. But the sound had already alerted the soldiers. They had to move again, faster this time, through thick fog. And winding routes, they ran. Branches slapped their arms. Rocks scraped their boots. Still, they pushed on. He didn't look back. He couldn't. Looking back meant slowing down. Suddenly she stopped. Her ears perked. She pointed to a narrow crack in the earth, barely wide enough for a human body. She slid through it without hesitation. Jensen followed, squeezing past stone and moss until they emerged inside a hidden ravine. A crystal-clear lake sparkled below, fed by a waterfall hidden behind vines. It was silent, untouched, and invisible from the sky. A perfect place to hide. Jensen exhaled and dropped to his knees. They had bought time. The girl sat by the water's edge and removed her boots. She dipped her feet into the cool stream and closed her eyes. It was the first time he had seen her relax completely. No weapons, no fear. Just peace. He joined her, taking off his helmet and letting the soft mist wash over his face. They sat together, side by side, saying nothing. The world didn't need to hear their words. It could feel them. Hours passed. The stars came again. They built a small fire in a stone ring and ate their final rations. Then she did something unexpected. She began to hum, a low, steady sound, a melody from her world. It rose and fell like wind between mountains. Jensen listened closely. The song didn't need lyrics. It was filled with memory. Of her people, of her sister, of everything she had lost. Yet in that same sound, there was something new, something alive. A seed of hope. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a small recorder. He turned it on and held it close to her. She hesitated, then nodded. Her voice, her song, her truth, it needed to be heard. And now for the first time, Jensen knew what had to be done. They didn't just need to escape. They needed to be seen. To be believed. To tell the galaxy she was never a beast. She was someone worth protecting. Jensen sat by the fire with the recorder still in his hand. The song she had sung still echoed in his mind. He didn't know what the words meant, but he understood the feeling. Pain, yes, but also survival, memory, and something more. She reached over and gently took the recorder. With careful hands, she clipped it to the necklace of beads she always wore. It rested near her heart, as if the voice of her people now lived between each beat. The night passed quietly, but neither of them truly slept. They took turns keeping watch while the fire flickered low. At dawn, mist rolled over the lake again. Birds began to sing softly from the trees above. Jensen stood at the edge of the water and washed his face. The cold shocked him awake. He stared at his reflection. He no longer looked like a soldier. The war had left marks on his body, but it was peace that had changed his eyes. She stepped beside him and looked into the water. For a moment, they stood shoulder to shoulder in silence. Then she pointed at her chest, at her heart, and said something. Soft, a word. He didn't know the meaning, but she repeated it. He listened closely, memorizing the sound. It wasn't just a word. It was her name. After all this time, after all the fear and fighting, she had finally told him who she was. In this time, after all the fear and fighting, she had finally told him who she was. Set it back slowly. She nodded with a faint smile. She touched her forehead to his, and for the first time, she let herself close her eyes. Suddenly, a light broke through the trees. A blue shimmer flickered across the ravine. Jensen turned and saw it another drone. It hovered in place for a second, then zipped away. It had seen them. Jensen's heart pounded. He looked at her, and she already knew. She grabbed her pack, stuffed with the recorder, her beads, and the drawing. They didn't need to speak. They had one more move to make. They raced through the trees, following the edge of the river. Every turn brought new branches, old roots, and fresh danger. Somewhere behind them, engines roared again. The soldiers were returning, and this time they had eyes in the sky. Up ahead, Jensen saw a rock spire rising from the forest. A signal tower built during an old outpost mission. It still stood, though tilted and covered in vines. If they could reach the top, maybe the recorder could transmit the message to someone who would listen. They climbed fast. Stone crumbled under their hands. Metal supports creaked and groaned. Still, they climbed. Wind tore at their faces. Leaves swirled around them like falling feathers. At the top, Jensen opened the panel and powered up the old transmitter. It buzzed, flickered, then blinked green. It still worked. He handed her the recorder, and she placed it carefully into the port. A red light turned on. Data was sending. Her song, her story, the truth. It was now racing through the stars to every frequency. The device could find. Someone somewhere would hear it. Below, movement stirred. They saw dark shapes in the trees. Soldiers, too many. Jensen looked at her, his face calm but firm. He raised his rifle but didn't aim. He wasn't going to shoot. He was just going. To buy time, she stepped in front of him and held up her hands. No claws, no growl, just open palms and soft eyes. The soldiers froze. They had never seen her like this. Not the way Jensen saw her. One of the soldiers stepped forward. It was Harris. He looked up at Jensen, then at her, then at the beacon behind them. The signal was still sending. He didn't raise his weapon. He simply lowered his head. More soldiers followed, lowering their rifles slowly. Quinn was not among them. Command had sent a different unit, one with no grudge. One that paused instead of fired. That pause saved everything. The transmission finished. A blue light blinked once, then faded. The story was out. It couldn't be erased now. Jensen exhaled and looked at her again. She was shaking slightly, but standing tall. The soldier nearest to them stepped forward. "What's your name?" he asked. Jensen turned and spoke it clearly. The name she had given him. The one that carried pain and pride in history. And for the first time since the war began, she was called by her name, not by fear.